Welcome to Bread for the People. I'm Jim Serpico. My guest today, a career and leadership coach. Some of her clients call her a moonshot mentor. Many of her clientele feel stuck, and through her work and coaching, her clients regain momentum so that they can achieve their goals. I know Laverne from her tenure as a high-profile network executive who worked on dozens of hit TV shows, including CSI, Numbers, NCIS, Without a Trace, and many more. Laverne McKinnon, welcome to Bread for the People.
Oh, thanks, Jim. I'm so excited to be chatting with you. I'm such a fan of this podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'm excited to catch up with you. I know a little bit about what you've been doing. You still produce television and film, but you're also a mentor and a leadership coach. I'm really into mentorship. I also know that a lot of your clients are current, entertainment executives and former entertainment executives. And the subject fascinates me. I mentor some young people. I have 30 years experience in the television business, and I know it's a tough business in every way. It's hard to get in. It's hard to, find your tribe within the industry. There's so many different fields and professions within show business. Tell me a little bit about your calling to show business and what was it about it that you wanted to get into it from the beginning?
Well, I grew up loving story. My sister taught me how to read when I was really, really little. And so I just consumed all of her books and comic books. And then there were no restrictions whatsoever in terms of how much content I could watch when I was growing up. And so I watched a ton of television. And then there was a period of time when I was in high school where I thought I wanted to be an actor because that's all I saw was, oh, there are these people on on my television screen, and it didn't really compute that it's like actually hundreds of people who eventually make that happen. And so I just always loved story. And then I started to understand through college and talking to people of like, oh, there's so many different roles. But ultimately what really drives me is the power of story. And I do believe that the entertainment industry as a whole, that we've barely scratched the surface of the power of story. And so I'm really committed to really seeing how it can be unifying, creating community, and help people heal and not feel so alone, really.
Right. I do think that power of storytelling kind of drew all of us. I also found like the business of it, there was an excitement. Just to be around a live show taping and see the lights and see the cameras. I mean, to this day, I walk on a Hollywood lot. I still find that romantic and exciting. I don't know if you do, but, I live in New York and always have for my career, and I still find something special about it. That being said, until I got into it, I had no idea about the business, specifically television. Now, there's a lot at stake in these jobs. I mean, for the listeners who don't know, right, you were an exec at CBS Television at a time, when the streamers barely existed, if they existed at all. Yeah. There was some basic cable, but you were like a power player. We had 3.5 networks that we could pitch to. And you and your team at CBS were written about in Hollywood Reporter every day. Daily Variety. So exactly what was your role at CBS?
Well, I joined the network in 1996, a few months after Les Moonves became the president of CBS. And I actually started in the children's programming department. I literally worked in the bowels of the CBS building. And
wow.
The entrance that I would come in and out of was where the Price is Right audience would line up. And when I would leave that little office and walk outside, people would turn because the door opened with this look of expectation and delight and wonder. And then they'd see my face and then go, ugh, who's that? It's like, that's no one special. But I loved my time at CBS when I started out in kids programming, and then I got bumped up to current programming, and then I wound up working in drama development, and then I eventually was head of what was called the drama development department. So I was promoted essentially every 18 to 24 months. And I was there at the network for about 10 years. And I was part of the team that developed the CSI franchise, which is what put CBS on the map. And we went from last place to first. And so it was a very, very exciting and heady time to be a part
Yeah.
of that culture.
And if you look at like the Paramount shows, right? Paramount, CBS, it's still the same blueprint. I watch Yellowstone, and I'm on the current season, and they're plugging all the commercials for the new shows, and it's still the same blueprint that you guys started. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a gigantic fan of Yellowstone. To me, that's just like a classic soap opera. Where
That one is, but what they're advertising in the commercial space is
is
the other
is the
procedurals.
procedurals. Yeah. And it's interesting because I feel like what I've been hearing from some of the places in the marketplace is that there are, like procedurals are starting to come back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe it. I mean, people love them. My youngest son is 18, and he loves that stuff. I personally, it wasn't my thing. I fell into really character-driven cable soap. That
Yes.
was kind of my specialty in terms of development and what I focused on. And I would try, and I did a pilot at CBS called Fort. No, that wasn't CBS. We did can openers at CBS. A procedural show on brain surgery that didn't go to series. But procedurals I think are coming back.
Yeah.
There's something satisfying about them.
I do have to say that when you did Rescue Me, that was so groundbreaking, and it still ranks for me like in my top 10 all-time favorite series ever. And
Oh
I
wow.
remember when I was at CBS, year after year, we would try to crack how do we do a show about firefighters? And when we were
Yeah.
following the procedural model, it was always like, oh, it's a fire of the week. And it was like, it's like hard to not like make that feel like forgive my use of this word, like, but boring. It's just like, it's like, we know what's going to happen. There's a fire, you put out the fire. Yay.
Exactly.
And what you did and the team that, you're surrounded with did with Rescue Me was take us into the psychology of who's drawn to this type of work and what's the impact
Right.
of this type of work. It was so well done. And it just like, it really opened up my brain and my creative essence to say, wow, there are a lot of different ways to tell stories about different sectors of industries, and you did an amazing job.
Well, I appreciate that. I think the magic formula there was Peter Tolan, who was an amazing writer, and then Dennis Leary, who had a certain style and also was so invested in firefighting and really dug deep into the type of people that become firefighters. He had them in his family. He would hang out with them as friends, and he knew them, and it was very important to him. So I think a lot of that came from Dennis, but I appreciate the kind words. Now, at what point did you discover the stakes in a position that you were in? I mean, I don't know if people realize how competitive it is to get a network job. It's almost like winning the lottery, and not to say it's luck, but I'm saying the odds are against anyone from achieving that because there are only so many spots. Am I right?
Yes. I mean, honestly, I didn't really recognize what a privileged position I was in at the network until I was out of the network, because I essentially had grown up within CBS over those 10 years. I mean, I wrote and I produced educational films out of college for several years. And then I was an assistant at an agency, and then I worked at an animation company called Klasky Chupo that did Rugrats and Real Monsters.
Of course.
And so I was very lucky, and I was an incredibly hard worker, but I didn't know as I was moving up the ranks just how fortunate I was, because that was a period of time in my career that things, even though again I was working my ass off and it was very stressful and high stakes, et cetera, et cetera, I just didn't know how blessed I was until I was out of the system.
Now, how how stressful was it, and where did the stress come from?
It was, I am a recovering perfectionist and a recovering people pleaser. So a lot of the stress and anxiety came from my own internal anxiety of wanting to be perfect, to make everybody happy. And for a significant part of my career, my ability to anticipate and to prioritize really served me well. So a lot of the stress came from just like me being like, oh, this isn't good enough. I didn't read this fast enough. My notes weren't thoughtful enough. And I'm not building relationships properly. I don't know who to call. And then the external pressure is that people are relying on me both in within the company and outside of the company to, like, who am I backing? Like, who are the writers or the directors that I'm saying, I really believe in this person to go the distance? And so if I say, oh my God, I love Jim Serpico, we've got to do something with this individual, I'm putting myself on the line as well.
Right, right. That's what maybe not all writers and showrunners or producers realize, right? It could be a really good pitch in the room, but it's not completely based on what happened in the room, although it does have to be great, right? That's a given. You have to pass that test first. But at the same time, there's a belief, there has to be a belief that these people are going to deliver, because it's really hard to make a great television show.
It is. And I think that's like probably one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the entertainment industry is like, oh, if I walk into that room, either, like if I'm auditioning or if I'm, pitching a show or a director coming in to say, hey, this is how I want to direct this. It's like, yes, that meeting is important, but, and I'm going to say this with some level of arrogance, which is like, I think the best executives and the most effective ones are the ones who have done their homework. So they do have a preconceived idea prior to anyone ever walking into the room, which is like, I've done my homework. I've read scripts from this writer. I've looked at episodes that they've produced. I've looked at this director's work. So I really have a sense of when they come in and say, hey, I want to do this show, I go, oh yeah, that's a great matchup in terms of their talent, their expertise, their experience. Awesome. And does
Yeah.
it fit the mandate of that particular season? And so the
Right.
yes becomes really easy, or the no becomes easy.
Now, there's a couple things that I think of. Like, I feel like people are doing their homework, but they're still taking the meetings, even though they don't have that feeling like these people can deliver. I don't know if that was the case for you guys. And if it was, is part of that, so and so from William Morris called, so I have to take that meeting. Otherwise, and I'm not saying that Paul Haas would ever do this, but, they could hold it against you on something else.
There's it's part of the relationship building, I think, that exists within any industry for sure. It's like you say, I would say yes to things that I was like, I'm sort of lukewarm, but who knows? And then for me, it's just who I am and how I operate, which is, I don't do this anymore, but back at my CBS days and when I also ran programming for Epix, is I would try to meet with as many people as possible, because even if someone's not quite ready at that moment in time to be creating and running their own show, but I've read a piece of material, it's like, I want to build a relationship with that person so that when they are ready, I can call back and say, remember when we met 3 years ago or 5 years ago? That was a great meeting and I've been tracking you ever since. It's like, this is why you should come work with me.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the
100%.
other misconception, is that buyers are in these power seats, but when there's something really wonderful, then it becomes competitive. And so sometimes it's not just about who can write the biggest check, but, as a creator, who do I feel safe with? Who's going to protect me? Who gets my vision? Who's going to help me across the finish line? And so, like, especially when I was at Epix, that was a big, because we were a new network and people were uncertain about whether or not they should be in business with us. And I relied a lot on relationships to say, like, I don't know ultimately what the outcome's going to be, but I can guarantee that I'm going to make this a pleasant development process for you.
Right. That's a great perspective. I do I do know a couple current executives that I think operate the way you're describing, really do their homework and kind of know going in, and they are very successful. Very
Isn't
successful.
yeah. I mean, in listening to your podcast, I feel like my favorite episodes that I've heard is when people do their homework, whether it's making bread, or a
Right.
TV show or putting a marketing plan together. I'm a big believer in combining that homework with intuition. It's like you can't rely exclusively on one, but marrying the
Yeah.
two. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have wild success, but I think it really helps up the odds to having a fulfilling experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, people assume that show business is glamorous and you get to hang around stars, which we do. Um, but we talked a little bit about the stakes. You are a leadership coach. You are dealing people who have gone through crisis, which may include getting the rug pulled out from them. Um, you know, it can be toxic. There are toxic people in Hollywood, probably like there are in many other industries, but truth be told, I don't know a lot about other industries. I mean, I do know about the food, certainly toxic environments there, but I will say, like, there was a movie, Swimming with Sharks, that I always loved, and my one of my sons is pursuing a career as a Hollywood executive, and I had him watch that movie, and he thought it was funny and over the top and crazy, and I think he's realizing that does exist. Probably not as much as it did, but certainly when you were in it, I would think it existed. I don't know that. I'm not even targeting CBS, but generally speaking, there were certainly agents known to be toxic, treating their assistants like minions that would do anything. They didn't care about them at all. They didn't even say hello to them during the day. Um, why? Why does Hollywood draw those types, or do they become that somewhere along the way?
That's such a great question. And I don't know if I have a completely clear answer for it. I do feel like my work as a coach and in reflecting on my career within the entertainment industry is that there's a constant pendulum swing between feeling powerful and powerless. And I'd say probably 98% of the time, regardless of who you are, what position you have, or how many awards you've won, or how much money you have in your bank account, how many houses you own, 98% of the time people feel powerless. And so they're constantly striving to be in a place where they can feel powerful and in control. And in my work as a coach and also just the work that I've done for myself is to try to find a third choice, which is a place of empowerment so that the pendulum isn't swinging so back and forth. Because when people feel powerless, they do everything they can in order to regain that position of power and control. And so that may be treating people poorly so that I feel better about myself,
Hmm.
making decisions that inflate and tend to one's ego because it's feeling so broken and battered. I think there's just a tremendous amount of pain that exists that goes unacknowledged. And if it's okay, Jim, I'd love to just spend like a minute talking about this concept of disenfranchised grief,
Yeah.
where disenfranchised grief is an expression that was coined a long time ago. I don't know, maybe it's like 1989 by a bereavement expert. His name is Kenneth Doka, and it describes this feeling that it's about losses that are not acknowledged or socially mourned or publicly supported. And so a lot of people within the entertainment industry, when they don't sell a project, when an audition, they don't get that role, and they never even hear back. You
Yeah.
work your ass off and you finally get a pilot made, and that pilot doesn't go to series. You get your series made and it's not well received. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not picked up for a second season, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are big losses and there are small losses, but because no is just a natural part of the culture of the entertainment industry, there's an expectation of you should be okay with this. But it's but
Yes.
it's not. It's not okay. And so when these unacknowledged losses happen, people and they're not witnessed, they're not supported publicly. There's not even like, I'm so sorry. It's just like, okay, what's next? And so what
Mm-hmm.
happens is it starts to tear away from the fabric of a sense of belonging. And
Mm-hmm.
belonging is a core human need. And when we don't
Mm-hmm.
belong, then bad things start to happen. And that's when people start to act out. That's when there's just a lot of poor behavior. And there are studies that, around belonging that really support that. And for me, I really believe that the belonging that's being impacted is because of disenfranchised loss.
It's interesting. It's interesting. You know, that whole process, just to help the listeners understand, you would, in your position, we were in opposite positions, right? I would be a seller, you were a buyer. So, laws of numbers, I knew I had to take out X amount of shows a year to try to get to the point where I got a show to series, which quite honestly would land me a paycheck because I don't get paid in general to develop shows. I don't get paid to do anything except produce them. And I have to be in on the generation of those. So the pressure of taking 25 to 40 meetings to get a project to the point where I could pitch it to you and the other networks. And let's say you bought it. There was a whole nother slew of months, 5 months of meetings to see if you were going to make the pilot. And if we make that, then we compare to the other pilots and we get tested and we see if we go to series. And all this time, this is a year-long process. I'm waiting to find out, am I going to not only make a living, but a shitload of money? Like a shitload of money, like unimaginable amount of
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. It's
And
huge.
then it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And then from my side, and again, these numbers are no longer relevant, but just to give a bit of context on my side. So, as a buyer working at a broadcast network in the early aughts, I would hear anywhere between 300 to 400 pitches over the like 4 or 5 months. I'd say
Now,
yes to
uh,
maybe 60.
wait a second. 300 to 400 pitches over 4 to 5 months. So it's all day.
Yes.
It's all day.
Yeah.
I mean, I would remember sitting in the lobby of CBS as well as the other places, and it's still like that. And you go in and you're waiting, and then there's another group waiting over here and another group waiting over here because there's all the departments and everyone's bumping to it. And then they come out and they talk to you, and it's like, and to be honest, like to us, you guys were like the gatekeepers and famous. You were famous, like you made those decisions, right?
Yes.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. And when I was at the network, it was during a period of time in which I was empowered and I was given a lot of freedom in terms of saying yes, as long as it, fit into the mandate for sure. And if it was outside the mandate, then of course I would go and talk to my boss and get pre-approval, to be able to say, hey, this thing's coming in. I think it's really interesting, doesn't quite fit, but this is why I love it.
Yeah.
And so then I would say yes to, let's say, 60 of those 400 to 500 pitches. You'd have to, let's say you sold that in September, a deal would be made quickly. You'd have to deliver a first draft of that script by December, maybe
Correct.
early January. Decisions about what would be made to pilot. So those 60 projects, maybe we'd shoot 10 pilots, which that was a lot back in that day. I remember some seasons we would shoot like 12. And so you'd rush to shoot that pilot. You'd go into prep in February. You'd have to deliver by the end of April, early May at the very, very latest. We'd test it. And then by mid-May, those 10 or 12 pilots, we'd choose between 2 to 4 to go to series. And if we
Mhm.
were lucky, one of those 2 to 4 would come back for a second season.
Not good odds.
Yeah, it is. It is like playing the lottery.
Not good odds.
Yeah.
Now, I was in the fortunate position of having a successful show, which put us on track to have an overhead deal to develop and take more shots. So I was able to draw a little bit of a salary.
Yeah.
But the real money came from getting shows on the air.
Yeah. And today that, that equation looks very differently because, if you're selling a show, obviously to broadcast network, you're looking at 13 episodes, maybe 18, maybe 22, which is was the norm. But all of these series now, as it's much, much, much shorter episode orders. It's 6 or 8 or 10. And then the streamers are, there's a lot of control in terms of, okay, I've got this downtime. I'm waiting months and months and months and months, sometimes over a year to know if my show is going to be picked up for a second season. How do I hold space? But I've got a lot of bills to pay. So the equations across the board have shifted so dramatically. And so obviously we're going, the entertainment industry is going through a lot of fundamental change right now.
Right. So that causes stress for people on the creative side and the selling side because there's not enough money, not enough opportunity to make consistent money. There was more. You were able to sell 22 episodes. Now you're selling 8 to 10, maybe 13, but then you're waiting and they're holding you so you can't work on anything else. But I would think as a network executive, the control and not in control, who knows if a show's really going to work, right? The people could be amazing. The script could be amazing. Something doesn't sit right. Something happens in the news that says we can't program this now.
Yes, yeah. Or there's a featured person, a lead of your show, in that person, gets into hot water for some reason. It's
right.
I have 2 quick examples for you. And again, these are so old that you may wind up cutting them out of the show, which I completely understand. So the year that CSI premiered was also the year that The Fugitive premiered. And everyone was betting on The Fugitive. It was a known title. It was a great cast. It was very exciting. And then we had CSI. It's nobody even knows what those letters stand for. And yet that show premiered and it had traction. I remember it premiered on a Friday night. And then the scheduling guys, Kelly Call and his team, were like, listen, this is catching a lot of heat. We need to move the show from Friday night to Thursday night. Thursday night was the night where most people were watching television. And we put it up. It was an ER owned that night. And it was and I remember Kelly saying, if not now, when? And it's who knew? We had no idea. We were putting everything behind The Fugitive. And then, and then my other story is we did a show about the CIA called The Agency, and it was set to premiere September 9/11. And our pilot episode had an eerie resemblance to the things that happened on 9/11. And of course, and it's we're supposed to premiere a week after that date. And so we pulled the episode, had to reconfigure. And while that show, went on to some modest success, that, if it wasn't, I really credit Sean Cassidy, who was the showrunner. He if that show wasn't in his hands, I'm not sure that we could have recovered from that moment in time, which was completely out of our control.
Wow. Now, the other, again, I was never a network executive, but what I see from my seat is if those 2 pilots that you ultimately put to series, they kind of made every step, which is a feat in its own. But now they go on and they're not received well. The whole year's development is in the toilet. And that's what happens why there's so much turnover in network executives, right? Someone's got to take the hit. We got to try something else. Certainly if that happens 2 seasons in a row, the whole team's out. Is that right?
Yes, somebody has to take responsibility.
Somebody has to take responsibility. And people who are in those seats are aware that that's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Which is, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, which is
It's
also
all a lot of pressure. I mean, I remember coming to the end so many times, like you said, in so many different ways, and it hurts. It hurts if your script is passed on because you get the line like you were in consideration. You're in consideration. Ah, so close. Great job. Look forward to developing with you again. Or we're gonna make the pilot, and then the pilot, for whatever reason, doesn't go. It hurts. I would always have to recover. It hurt so bad.
how would you recover? How would you, yeah, manage that? Not manage isn't even the right word. How would you grieve?
Um, I would just keep going. I would just put my head down. I had a little bit of a cushion to keep developing. And I'll be honest with you, I lived pretty low. I never lived large. Um, so I was able to manage. I didn't have the financial pressures that some people have. Um, you go out to LA and you have a show and you buy a house in the hills. The problem is you don't know that that's going to continue. Um, I always led a modest lifestyle. Um, and we managed to self-generate things,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where there were comedy specials. We did all different types of things. And I'm still doing that. I created different lanes of revenue to not just rely on television, which included some management, working with comedians and developing for them, or putting out records for them, or even comedians I don't manage. That's how I'm able to survive in this business. I do lots of different things, um, all related to show business, all leveraging the skill sets I have. Um, yeah, that's how I was able to do it. But there were some times that were harder than others, and it came to a crossroads with me when I was running the production company. I had to make a decision, because we were out of deals, we were out of production deals, and that's when I really had to say, do I take a chance and go out on my own, or do I continue doing what I was doing, but I wasn't fulfilled anymore. So I took that chance to do it on my own. And I did that for 3, 4 years, and then COVID happened. So that changes a lot of things. The money stops, and the mind shift stops too. Because I gave up my office in the city. Quite honestly, I couldn't afford it with no money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start this bread thing as a sidekick, and now we're knee deep in this. I didn't plan it, but here we are, And like you, I'm still taking out my shows, still pitching shows as a writer, um, and you never know. But I became. It's interesting. I also studied mindfulness, not because of this, but because of some other things going on, and cognitive behavioral therapy and all kinds of things. And I think that all that was helpful. I think all that was helpful. You know, um, the money thing. Like I think a lot of people are in Hollywood for the money. So how important is that? There's so much pressure on the money, and that's become less important to me. I'd rather live a life that I enjoy and a journey I enjoy and have camaraderie and be surrounded by people who treat other people with respect.
Mm-hmm.
Because that you don't see that sometimes in these high stakes professions. You know.
No, it can be very, yeah, very, very tender. And I relate to so much of what you're sharing, and what I'm really hearing you say is how you've taken agency. You've found agency through the losses that you've experienced professionally. And, the moving forward is like, okay, I'm not going to let this pass or this disappointment define me or my career. It's like it's like I can feel it. It
Correct.
hurts. There's that great expression, Murakami, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Mm.
And so the suffering comes from the meaning that we take from the pain. And if we're living life, then we're going to be feeling pain. And so it's like, what meaning are we associating with that? So your
Yeah.
pilot doesn't get picked up. The meaning that you can create is like, oh, I suck. I'm not good enough. This is the only shot. I'm never going to, no one's ever going to want to be in business with me again. Or it's like, wow, I really went an incredible distance. I met some amazing people. What a testament to my talent and my hard work that I got a pilot made. Out of 400 pitches, I was one of 10 that got chosen to be made into a
I did
pilot.
feel that way at times. I mean, there was one year we had Rescue Me going, and I had 2 pilots at 2 different networks being shot within 3 miles of each other. So I had Rescue Me, I had these things, and they're big budget things, man. But that's where the ego thing starts getting into your head.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of money at play. So you got to be somewhat careful with that.
Yeah, and I
The other
so relate
interesting
to
thing
that too.
in terms of grief and loss, like even there's always grief and loss, even in the success. Being on a TV set, so you win in that your show is going to series. Talk about toxicity. I would say, and I'm being conservative, 40% of television sets are completely toxic.
Mm.
That's my feeling. And there's a hierarchy of soldiers of people who are technicians that help get the product done, but they have a little bit of a say, but it's really coming from this general or a person, actor or actress with power who could just be despicable and horrible. And there's a lot of people in this industry that spend 12 hours a day on a set in a toxic environment. Now you meet good friends and there's people you relate to. And even if it's great, the other bad thing is it ends. So you just did 7 seasons with these people that you saw every day. You saw them more than your family. You're probably not going to talk to them more than twice a year for the rest of your life, if even. So there's grief there too.
Yeah, there's such a polarity, and I think that it's something that I feel like I've really had to learn because I found that quite confusing of like, why could I be so excited about this and then also feel sad? So like I think about you doing Rescue Me, shooting 2 pilots. I'm sure you had your kids at the time. So it's like, yay,
I
I've
did.
got massive professional success and I'm not seeing my family at all.
Right.
And so there's this polarity, across all of our experiences. And it's our relationship with the polarity, I think, that really shapes the level of stress and anxiety and the level of toxicity. Because again, I just keep going back to like, where is that toxicity coming from? It's coming from a place of real deep fear. And because the trains are moving so fast, there's not enough time to push the pause button and be like, hey, Jim, I just saw you like lash out at your assistant. What's happening? What's going on? It's like there's
Right.
no time to just push the pause button to have a human check-in, which work isn't therapy, but I also think that we can bring a level of humanity into the exchanges that we're having with people. And it's like, hey, I'm having a really tough time. It's like I'm about to lose my house. It's like, wow, I'm so sorry. Do you need some time to take off to go take care of that? Because I need you at your best. So how can I
Yeah.
support you in taking care of whatever it is that needs to be taken care of so you can come back to us being the Jim that
Well,
I
that's
know?
that's okay, but not at the, there's a it's that's got to be said at the right time because if you're saying it to the person who is also under the gun, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
They're not gonna care.
Yeah. And
They're
these,
not gonna care.
yeah. And it's like, and these processes have been so like chiseled into, you know what, we're just going to put blinders on. We're not going to pay attention. We're not going to actually have a real, how are you question? I'm just going to
How
say,
are
how are
you?
you? So I look good, but it's like, and that's, and that's quite problematic. It's like, and I'm so happy that there's so much awareness going on in terms of people's mental and emotional well-being and the toxicity
Mm.
that you're referencing. It's like, yeah, it's a huge part of the entertainment culture. And I'm sure it's a part of, other industries as well. And I'm excited to be having these types of conversations because it's time to take a closer look at where is it coming from and how do we manage it?
But if you had to take 8 pitch meetings a day and do your homework,
Mm-hmm.
uh, when when could you leave? You had to work 10-hour days, if not more.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was a horrible wife and I was a horrible parent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's like, of course it had.
So you look back on that now and you say, without a doubt, I was horrible.
Yes. Yeah.
Is it worth it? Is it for a young person going through it? You're someone with experience. They don't have a choice in that position. You didn't have a choice.
You know what? There's always a choice. You might not like the
Okay.
consequences of that choice, but there's always a choice. I didn't have to
Meaning,
say yes.
okay, let's expand. Tell me what you mean by this. Your choice was to not be there.
It could be not be there, or because I had no tools. Like I didn't know that I didn't have a choice, so I would lie all the time because I didn't know that it was okay not to lie. So instead of saying, Jim, I love this project. This is really cool. You're in the mix. I'll let you know. I could have said, hey, Jim, I really love your writing. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get this across the finish line. There are, like 7 other projects that are similar to yours. I think it's a long shot. I don't know when I'm going to know, but let's circle back in a month. But instead I lie to you. It's like,
And you say the first
yeah,
version.
yeah, exactly. Because I'm a people pleaser. I don't want you to be mad at me. I'm a perfectionist, so I have an expectation that I'm going to be able to manage things. And so it's like a recipe for disaster.
In my experience, most people say the first. And I think they're lying. Like in Hollywood, I don't believe that what you're hearing is the at all a clue as to what's really going on.
Yeah. And I completely agree, especially like for me, the marketplace right now. I love it when someone says to me, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, I understand. I might not like it, but I so respect, like, I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to be able to get back to you. I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk about this. I don't know when I'm going to be able to read this. I just don't know. Is that not fun to hear? It's like, it's horrible to hear, but I'd rather hear that than, let me take a look at this over the weekend and I'll get back to you. And then I follow up and I get no response.
Right.
That just feels unprofessional and disrespectful. Like I'm a big, and again, I wasn't
But that's
always
what
like
happens
this,
every day.
but it's like, do what
You
you
know
say,
how many
say what you
people
do.
so many people will start this conversation with us about a project, take the project, and then they don't answer at all. That's another one. They don't return the calls. And I get it. But I don't know what a person's to do in your spot. I guess what I was getting at is, okay, so you didn't have to lie that way, but you could not shorten your hours.
No, but again, that was a choice because I was ambitious, I was driven, I had a belief system of how I could thrive in this environment because I came out of, like when I was working at CBS, I came out of animation children's program and then I'm working in prime time. I just felt like I had so much to prove. And so for me, I felt like I'm going to be the first to read everything. I'm going to read everything. I'm going to meet with everybody. I'm going to have like my notes like written out. I'm going to be super thoughtful, and like I would take like notes in terms of how people said things. And so the trade-off was I wasn't present as a wife or as a mother.
Wow. So, cut to the end of your tenure. How does it end? Do you take yourself out?
Well, I'm not out. So in 2006, after 10 years at CBS, I was fired, and that was a big shock to me. I didn't see it coming. In retrospect, I should have seen it coming. And then
Was it just you?
yeah, it was just me, and it was just no longer a match. Like, could have things have been handled differently on both sides of the equation? Absolutely, but they didn't. But it did certainly open up the door for me to do a lot of personal development and clean up how I had gotten so off track in terms of like, what are my values? What values am I honoring? I didn't know who I was anymore. And so that was
Mm-hmm.
a gigantic wake up call for me to, yeah, just get my shit together. And then I ran programming for Epics. And then I switched to independent producing so that I could have the freedom and the flexibility and felt more empowered to say no and create boundaries. And so I have a production company right now with Kay Cannon, who wrote the Pitch Perfect franchise, directed Blockers and Cinderella, and we've got a handful of things moving forward. But I spend the majority of my time coaching because I want to
But
help people who are like in positions like me, where it's like I had no tools and skills and I didn't know how to navigate getting unstuck or navigate pivoting to something that
yeah,
was more fulfilling.
but that's what I want to kind of get into a little deeper in terms of, so you got fired and you don't know who you are. So your identity as you knew it was stripped away.
Yes,
Like, what are you feeling upon getting fired?
I'm feeling worthless, unlovable, like I should die, that I definitely wanted to leave Los Angeles. I wanted to hide, um,
Were you embarrassed?
embarrassed, humiliated, uh, ashamed. Yeah, all of it. So much
And
of it.
then how long do you stay feeling like this, and what do you do to get out of it?
Years. I feel that way for
Really?
years. And I still have
Wow.
PTSD over it.
Really?
Yeah. And I started the path to having a better understanding of myself and my lack of tools when I started working with a coach.
Mhm.
And I love this. I went to go see a friend because I was at the end of my rope and I didn't know what to do and therapy wasn't helping. And he said, "Oh, you should go talk to my coach." And I was so confused because I'm like, I'm not really sporty. I'm like, I don't play sports. And he's
Right.
like, no, no, no. This is like a life coach. And I was like, I don't really know what this is. I've never heard of it, but I'm so desperate and I don't know how to get myself out of the hole that I'm in. And she really transformed my life. She tragically died in a car accident 8 months after we started working together. And
Oh,
then I, I
horrible.
became a
Sorry.
coach because I wanted to learn what she did so I could apply it to myself. And then I was like, and Jim, I have to tell you, when I started coaching, it transformed who I am as a producer, as an executive, because the basis of my coach training is that people are creative, resourceful, and whole. Nothing is broken, nothing needs to be fixed. So my job as a coach, as a producer, as an executive is to help the people that I'm working with access their own inner wisdom. And
Yeah,
I
man.
primarily do that by asking questions, not by giving advice, because advice is short term and it doesn't really stick. It's like people have to find their own North Star.
Right. Um, are you helping them think a different way?
Yes, I love that you had mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy earlier because I have a certification as a cognitive behavioral therapist, and
Yeah.
and wow, that's incredible to look at the quality of one's thoughts. Is this helpful or is this
Yeah.
hurtful? It's like,
Right.
wow, it never occurred to me to look at the quality of my thoughts, and I would just like, man, I hated myself. I hated myself so
Yeah.
much.
I mean, that stuff is magical. I'm into it. I read a lot about that. I mindfulness very related. I'm also funny enough from talking to two recent guests on this show who are Buddhists and have been for a long time. They've gotten me into reading some beginner books on that, and the thought process is so similar to mindfulness that I just love it.
Yes.
I love, and I'm not 100% with it all the time. I kind of have to remind myself to not think this way, especially when I'm driving and I'm getting angry with road rage. But it helps, man. It helps.
It does. And to recognize that thought always leads to feeling. So if I change the thought, I can change the feeling. And
Right.
it takes practice, it's not easy, but once like it's like riding a bike, it's like once you find that balance, it's like, "Oh, this actually isn't so hard." But it's the idea of like, "Okay, how do I take the training wheels off and do this myself?"
And maybe we're coming full circle here, but one of these young people that I'm mentoring that is in somewhat of a toxic work environment, I tell them it's not you. You don't have to let this person's feelings and emotions affect you. I understand how hard it is. They're young, they don't have the skills, but if you just power through it and not ignore it, but realize you have the ability to control whether or not this is going to upset you.
Yes,
Don't personalize it.
exactly. Yeah.
You know, you can get through it. Put your time in. But it does affect, and another key, and you said it, is that this feeling of belonging. How do you feel like you belong if you're surrounded by someone who berates you or doesn't talk to you?
Yeah. And that's boundaries, right? And I think that what you're talking about is that we don't always believe that we can create boundaries. It's like, no, I'm actually powerless, because if I don't agree to, go pick up my boss's dog's poop, then I'm going to get fired. Or
on a Sunday.
Yeah. Or if I, don't take this network executive's notes, then they're not going to pick up my project. And while, yes, all of that is possibly true, what's most important in terms of the marathon of one's life and one's career is to be able to establish boundaries. And boundaries are for ourselves. They're not for other people. And so I think it's absolutely critical to be able to say, like, I understand that you want me to go, take time off to go do this and pick up the dog's poop. When you first hired me, this was not part of the job description. It wasn't something that we agreed to. And if it's something that you want to continue to happen, then I think we need to have another conversation about the scope of my responsibilities and my compensation. And the boss could be like, fuck you, no way. Who do you think you are? That's good information to have, because maybe this isn't the job that's the right match.
I love that. I think it's hard for young people to muster up the courage to have that conversation.
I think it's hard for everybody.
But it's okay to have that conversation, isn't it?
I think it's
like jumping outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's not easy to have that conversation, but once you have that conversation with someone for the first time, you will be able to have a conversation like that again with someone else.
Exactly.
For the right reason.
Yeah. Because if you're not able to change the thought or take action, what it does is it chips away at one's self-trust and one's self-love. And so the cautionary tale is you end up like me after 10 years of people pleasing and perfectionism. I didn't know who I was. I hated myself. I had access to no self-love, and I was fired. I was like a zombie walking through life because I did not know how to advocate for myself or to take care of myself.
Right. But luckily you've found people along the way to help mentor you and figure it out.
Yeah. I had that icky, ugly, hitting bottom, couple of years of, just real despair.
Wow. So Laverne, you have room for more clients if people want to find you. I know you write blog posts. I read them on LinkedIn. I love them.
Thank you.
So I know we could follow you on LinkedIn. What about your website?
Yes, I would love to encourage anyone who's gotten to this point in the podcast to go to moonshotmentor.com and sign up for this weekly newsletter. I publish it, and stories from the front lines, but with a lot of what Jim and I have been talking about in terms of tools and skills to help, navigate life and career. And then I'm on Instagram as well, at Moonshot Mentor, which has like lots of little tidbits that are outside of the newsletter. And I really want to help people across their finish lines. I'm so passionate about that, and help them rewrite the narratives of their lives so that they can, be fulfilled and really honoring their North Star and living their own values and purpose as opposed to someone else's.
Amazing. Well, thanks for all the great work you're doing. And it was great to catch up. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Me too. So love this conversation. Thank you.